I've had 3 of these air-dried walnut slabs kicking around my shop for the past few years. Last year, I made a window bench for the kitchen out of one of them. Came out great. And now I think I'm going to make a side table for the TV room to replace this mass-produced monstrosity, which has been slowly falling apart for the past few years. So let's break this down and get to it. All right, so our slab is 15 and 1/4 inches wide. So let's grab a compass. We'll draw 2 15-inch diameter circles for the top and the base. Some of this remaining material we'll use to join the 2 pieces together. And then once it's drawn out, we'll rough it out on the bandsaw, then get to flattening. Now in laying out our parts, we got some nice figure here. This will be our top. We're gonna avoid this area. This is the live edge. A lot of sapwood, bark. Don't want any of that in our piece. And then we'll cut the base from this area over here. It's a little bit more plain than this, so let's make this the star of the show. With the top and bottom roughed out, let's hit it with the hand plane. Let's see what lies underneath the bandsaw mill marks and the dirt and grime from sitting in my shed for the past few years. So with this air-dried walnut, we have some really nice variation in color. In addition to the brown tones, we have purple and gray and black, really pretty stuff. We don't always get that with the kiln-dried material. Oftentimes they'll steam it to even out the sapwood with the heartwood, and a lot of those colors just muddy together. Now one thing I have to do is get this down in thickness, but I can't put it through my planer because I have a lunchbox planer and this is simply too wide. So this morning with some scrap plywood, I made a router sled to get this down in thickness. Let's give it a whirl and see how it goes. That's a big pile of sawdust, and that's from only taking off about 1/8 of an inch of material. I'm going to do the same to the other side, keep things nice and balanced, and then I'll do the same to the top. And then I have some joinery to figure out how to get these 2 pieces together, make it look like a table. Before we go any further, now's probably a good time to tell you what I'm envisioning the table looking like. It's going to be a Z-type style table, so we'll have a top, a base, and a leg joining the 2 at an angle. Now before I do the joinery, I do want to put a bevel on the underside of the top and on the top of the base. And it's a weird angle. It's like 60 degrees and change, so I just can't put it on the router table with a chamfer bit. So what I did, I set the bed of the oscillating spindle sander at my desired angle. I put a very aggressive belt on, and I'm just going to muscle it through, and hopefully I'll get my desired result, and it won't take too much time. It's been about 7 or 8 minutes. Our bevel is slowly but surely working its way up. Once the bevel meets the top, I'll be done. So I went ahead and milled up a blank that's going to make up the leg of the table, and I'm going to cut the ends to match the same bevel as the table top and base. This way when the parts are joined together, we'll have a nice seamless transition. So where I just cut, I'm now going to cut a 90-degree notch from that area. That's to provide the joint both more glue surface area and also a little ledge for the tabletop and the base to rest on. With the joinery on our leg all cleaned up, we can now do the corresponding mortise in our table base. I made a template. I had a 1/4 inch MDF. We'll stick it down with some double-sided tape. We'll load up the router with a template bit. I actually had to buy this because my 1/4 inch bit wasn't deep enough, 1/2 inch cutting length. We'll do it in a few passes. I did do some test pieces because there was a lot of math involved, and I don't always trust my math in the real world, but I think I got it. So let's give this a go and we'll see how I did. So I'm really close to my desired depth. I'm gonna use a router plane to really nail it, have a little bit more control with that than with a powered router. But before I take off the template, I'm gonna leave it on so I can reference my chisel against it so I can square off the corners of the mortise. All right, things are really starting to move along. After some fine tuning with the router plane, I got the depth just right. All the faces are meeting nice and flush. That's really gonna help give us a nice strong glue joint. We have a nice friction fit. I'm now gonna do the same joinery to this end of the leg and to the table's top. I'll do that off camera. And when I come back, we'll get started on some really cool sculpting, adding some more design details. Stay tuned. So I went ahead and did the joinery to attach the top to this end of the leg. It was just a repeat of what I did on the bottom. Everything's going smoothly according to plan. This is dry fit right now. That's why I have this support here, or else it would be falling apart on me. What I need to do now is thin out this leg. I'm gonna add some curves. I'm gonna shape it. That's why I left this extra meat on the bottom and on the top. That way I have enough material to follow this bevel. But before I do that, I think I want to work on the top and make it a little more interesting. Not gonna lie, that was a little bit stressful because I have so much time invested in this one piece, but it worked just fine. That first pass established the perimeter of the lip. Now, each time I step the fence back, I'll give it another pass and bring in the cut closer and closer to the center until all this waste in the middle is excavated. So after about a dozen passes, I still have a little bit of material left in the center, but I'm so far into the depth of the table that I've lost my ability to lower the piece safely under control. So instead of pushing my luck and having a catastrophe happen, I'll just remove this little bit with hand tools. Okay, so that little bit in the center is cleaned up. While I'm at it, I'm gonna hit the whole thing with the card scraper, clean up all the little imperfections from moving the router bit step by step by step. Let me clean all those little tracks up, and then we'll move on to shaping the leg. So after some scraping and sanding, I'm just gonna wipe it down with some mineral spirits, get an idea of what this piece is gonna look like once we apply some finish. And I think it's gonna look really nice. That's pretty. All right, let's shape that leg. I'm about to drill some holes in the leg for screws. This is gonna help during the glue up, draw the pieces together because everything's at an angle. It's gonna be hard to get really good clamping pressure. And then later when I plug those holes, I'm going to use a new material, new to me at least, and I think it'll turn some ordinary holes into a really cool design element. Now those holes I just drilled, 1/4 of an inch in diameter, because that's the size of the plug I want to use. Problem is a number 8 screw, the head is a little bit wider than that, so I'm going to use my drill and my sander, grind down the heads just a little bit so we get a nice fit. So with that first round of shaping, we added a curve here, and we mirror image that same curve along the backside. Now what I'm going to do is, I drew a curve here. I'm going to remove this material so the leg will be narrowest in the center and flare out on either end to its maximum width. All right, so now that we have our slight hourglass shape on the leg, let's work on the joint here, remove this excess material, and flush it up with the bevel. All right, spoke shapes are nice and sharp. Let's have some fun sculpting this piece. My goal is to get really nice, crisp, clean chamfers that are also symmetrical from one side to the other. I'm going to take my time because it's really hard to put wood back on after you take it off. You might notice my spoke shave twisting towards the end. That's because I want the chamfer to sort of snake its way along the side. I think that'll look really cool. All right, our leg is sculpted, our parts are sanded, and we are finally, after 14 minutes of hard work, feels like weeks, we are ready for glue up. We're going to use epoxy. That way I have the extra open time and maximum strength for this glue up, and should go fairly easy. Let's do it. So that was a pretty straightforward glue up. The screws really helped bring the parts together, took a lot of the stress out of the equation. I'm going to give this 24 hours and come back and do the finishing touches. And now it's time to plug up those screw holes. And there's a couple of different ways we can tackle this. One would be to make the plugs out of the same material as the table. Try and hide it, conceal it, like I did with the plugs on this amp stand that I made a little while ago. Another way would be to use a contrasting material, like I did with this sculpted rocker. The rocker is made of walnut and the plugs are made of ebony, which really set off each other really nicely. Now for this table, I am going to use a contrasting material, but I'm not going to use wood. I'm going to use ivory, synthetic ivory, because real ivory is really hard to come by and wildly illegal. I purchased these two blanks from a small online retailer that supplies luthiers, knife and gun makers, pool cue manufacturers, anyone looking for a substitute for the real thing. And the cool thing about this material, you can work it with all your woodworking tools. You could turn it, cut it with a bandsaw, drill into it, carve it, pretty much anything goes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my Veritas tapered plug cutter. I'm going to cut 4 plugs and plug these guys up. All right, the 5-minute epoxy's set up. Let me sand these plugs back, and then we'll put on our first coat of finish. And after applying 2 more coats of finish, we are done. I'm really happy with how this came out. For such a small project, it's comprised of only 3 pieces. It really provided a serious challenge in getting all the angles right, so everything would line up in the same plane, to sculpting the pieces so they all flowed nicely to one another. Really fun project, and a lot more work than I thought it was going to be going into it. Now, if you've never done it before, sculpting parts by hand can be a little intimidating, but it can also be very liberating. Just grab a spoke shave or a rasp, go nuts, have fun with it, let your eyes and your instinct be your guide instead of a set of rigid plans, and things usually work out just fine. I know it might not be everyone's cup of tea, but I love the faux ivory and how it plays against the air-dried walnut. Very small detail, but I think with a lot of impact. And doing the raised rim, that was new to me. I've never done that before. My process might have been a little unorthodox, but a hell of a lot cheaper than a CNC. I'm very excited to put this table to use. I'm very thankful to you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe, leave a comment, and until the next video, take care.